Welcome back to the Preparing for Success After Prison program. I am Michael Santos, and I'm just so grateful. And I want to start off by just saying that I am really grateful to every person who's going through our program. I know that, prison programs aren't always engaging, and I'm certainly not, producing programs with Disney level productions. In fact, I'm just here in this room. This is my one camera over here. I've got computers over here. I've got a camera here. I've got lights up there. I've got a computer on the wall posted up there. I've got a laptop I'm producing on here. I've got a cell phone here. I'm doing all of this work all by myself because I really want to connect with you, but I have to prove myself worthy of your attention. And that's what I am trying to do every day through this work. I want to prove worthy of your attention. There's a lot of competing messages for your attention. Some of those messages, in my view, are awful. Those messages are, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. You've got nothing coming. Forget about the world outside and focus on your life in here. To me, those are bad messages. I want to be proving worthy of saying, hey, listen to these strategies that leaders taught me, because these strategies transformed my life and helped me prepare for success after prison. I am absolutely confident they can work for you as well. And I want to give you a little follow-up to a story I gave in the earlier video when I spoke about going to that first team meeting when I was still in a high security penitentiary. Because this program, this module, is the fifth in the series where we talk about action. But back then, I spoke about asking a unit manager, what, if anything, can I do to position myself to get to a lower security prison? And those who have been following through the program remember that he told me there isn't anything I can do. The bad decisions that I made as a kid that put me in prison resulted in a 45-year prison sentence. And according to his view, I belonged in a high security penitentiary, and that's where I would remain until I concluded my sentence. But I refused to allow him to define success for me. Just like I am encouraging you, do not allow your present circumstances to define your success. Think about the best possible outcome for you, and then recognize how every step is going to put you incrementally closer to what you want to become. Now, I'm not saying that getting to a lower security prison was how I defined success ultimately, but success is really a journey. It's not a destination. Every little step we take is an action step. It takes us closer. So remember the modules of the course, right? First, you've got to define success. Then you have to set goals that align with success, smart goals that are specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and time-bound. And then you have to have the right attitude. You have to move forward with 100% commitment to success. And you have to aspire to what it's going to become. But none of that matters if you don't take action. So I told you I walked out of that team meeting with a commitment to take action, to do something about what I didn't like. And I thought, how am I going to do it? Well, you remember my goals. They were going to be to earn a university degree. They were going to be to become a published author. And they were also going to include building a strong support network. So I got to the penitentiary in 1988, and over the next couple of years, I really focused on executing those goals. Those goals were going to help me obliterate the limitations that society said I couldn't do. I was preparing for success. And by pursuing that path, I found these mentors that came into my life. In fact, I wrote about all of them in this book, which is a part of the course, Earning Freedom, how I found these people that I didn't know, and I persuaded them to believe in me and become my advocates. And they would come to visit me in prison, and they would open opportunities for me to publish with them. And because I published with them, more people would meet me, or I would steer people to those publications to advance me as a candidate for their support and help. And it was through that process that I realized, okay, when the time is right, I can seize the initiative and try to go to a lower security prison. All of these were incremental action steps. And that action step became important for me around 1996 or so, 95 maybe, when I was in my probably 7th year or maybe 8th year of imprisonment. And I saw a level of violence really increase in the penitentiary. And when that violence level increased, I knew that I was in a more vulnerable position. Because if the environment is volatile and crazy, it can threaten my ability to finish my plans. If I'm on lockdown, I can't go to the library. If I can't go to the library, I can't do the research I need to do to send my papers into school. So I have to be thinking about all these little action steps. Well, when the penitentiary got violence, I was sitting across the table from a mentor of mine who came to visit me. His name was Bruce, and he was from the University of Chicago. He was an educator. And Bruce and I spoke, and I said, I think it's time for me to transfer from the penitentiary to try to get to a medium security prison. And he said to me, well, why don't you just ask for a transfer? And I told him, because it doesn't really work like that in prison. If I just ask for a transfer, it's like I'm going to go into a lottery. I don't know where I'm going to go. And maybe they'll send me to some prison where I can't finish my master's degree. And that's how I'm defining success right now. I really want to get my master's degree. And he said, well, how do you propose we do it? And I said, I have an idea. He said, what's that? I said, well, I read there was a director of education for the Bureau of Prisons. Her name was Sylvia. And she had published an article about the importance of a GED, getting a high school equivalency diploma. This is back in the late 1980s, and maybe the early 1990s, I should say. And I told Bruce, I said, here's what I think we should do. We should jointly write an article that talks about why the GED is not enough. A person in prison needs to take action and do more. Because I don't think the job market is going to be very friendly to people who have a criminal background. And if a person wants to transition into the job market successfully, that person should have more skills. So I said, why don't we write an article about how you and I developed a relationship and how you're mentoring me and preparing me for the challenges I'm going to face in the future, and show other people how to get mentors. And then we can try and publish it in a journal. And once it's published, you could send that article to Sylvia, and hopefully you can develop a dialogue with her, and we can get more information on where is the best prison for me to go so that I can complete my education. And we agreed. And so Bruce and I began collaborating on this article, which eventually became called I think it was The Prisoner and the Professor. And then because he was an academic, he was successful in persuading what's called a peer-reviewed journal to publish the article. So we published the article, and when we published the article, Bruce sent a copy of the published piece to Washington, D.C., the Bureau of Prisons headquarters, and she received this article where we're giving her credit, and we're talking about how she inspired me as a young man in prison, and how I reached out and built mentor relationships, and how the professor who really just wants to see people grow began visiting with me and sending me information and correcting my papers and so on and so forth. And that led to Sylvia inviting Bruce to come to Washington, D.C. and meet with her. And Bruce did. He went to D.C., he sat across the table from her, and he said, I would like to help other people in prison. And she gave him carte blanche to go to any prison in the United States, federal prison, and meet with the supervisor of education and also with the people serving time in those institutions. And the great thing about that is it would give me real data. I'd get to hear what the people in prison were saying about the institutions commitment to support people who were pursuing an education. And it was through that interactive series of action steps that led Bruce to get to McKean, Pennsylvania, where he met with a few different people in prison. And those people in prison were able to tell Bruce how much support they received from the education department. And now I had a new set of information. I identified the prison where I wanted to go. But there was a problem because that prison was in northwest Pennsylvania. I was then confined in Atlanta, Georgia, but my release address was in Seattle, Washington. So I knew it was going to be a bit of a challenge to get to that specific prison. But what I could do was reach out to my support network. Remember what I said. Early in my journey, I set this three-pronged goal. Focus on getting an education, focus on building a strong support system, and focus on contributing to society in meaningful, measurable ways. Well, after years of doing that, I had many mentor relationships, many academics who had influence with the Bureau of Prisons. And I also had mentors that were just in the university system that could invite me to publish either in their books or we could publish together in journals and so on and so forth. And through that process, I could execute my plan. Once I got a university degree, it made it easier for me to get mentors to believe in me. Once I had some mentors to believe in me, it made it easier to open opportunities to publish. And all of that worked together as a system that helped me build support. And some people might say, well, you were just lucky to be able to get to the places where you want to go. And I would argue that the harder you work on preparing for success after prison, the luckier you become. Now, if this only happened in one prison, then you might say, yeah, it was just luck. But if you read through Earning Freedom, or if you read through Success After Prison, you will see that we can create our own luck regardless of where we are. But it wasn't simply publishing the article that made it possible for me to transfer out of a high security penitentiary and go to a medium security prison. Rather, it was the execution of that plan, defining success, creating goals that align with success, moving forward with 100% commitment, 4, having an aspiration of seeing what I wanted to become, and then taking all of the incremental action steps along the way. It's not easy to get a university degree when you're out here in society. It's infinitely harder when you're where you are, if you're a member of this program and working from inside of a jail or a prison. But it can be done. The only question is, are you willing to do the work? Now, college education isn't the same thing today, perhaps, as it was back in the mid-1980s or the late 1980s or early 1990s, because now there are many opportunities to emerge successfully and build a career. But when I was starting my journey, I had to deal with the world as it existed. And the world as it existed, I wasn't only thinking about the things that I couldn't control, like I couldn't control my release date. That was something beyond my ability to control. But I could always take incremental action steps that would put me on the pathway for new opportunities. And that's the same thing that you can do. You can start taking incremental action steps today, but building a body of work that will help you really advance the possibility for you to succeed in the weeks, months, years, and decades ahead. And sometimes that doesn't only mean participating in programs. It means engineering or architecting your own program. You might be in segregated housing unit and not have access to college classes or even visiting or phone calls. Or, you may be in a prison that doesn't offer as much as another prison. You always have a choice, though, on what can I do with the resources that I have to open opportunities for me to influence the future, just like I did. I had to listen to unit managers tell me I would never leave a high security penitentiary. And then I got to a medium security prison, despite what he said. Did it happen overnight? No, it did not. Did I go through a lot of negative influences along the way? Without a doubt. But then the same thing happened in the medium security prison. You stay on this path. It was there that I completed my master's degree and started working toward a PhD program. It was from there when they blocked me from getting a PhD after a year of study, I turned my attention elsewhere and began learning new skills. And so I want you to be thinking about what skills can you learn? What action steps can you take to position yourself for a better outcome? In the previous video, I spoke a little bit about this book here, Success After Prison, how I built assets worth more than $1 million within 2 years of getting out of prison. Well, what did the decisions I made in prison, how did that influence what businesses I built? How I built credit, how I persuaded people to invest in me? I can tell you there's a little secret that if you agree to commit yourself to learning a few things, and that's why they're all a part of this course in preparing for success after prison. Regardless if you have access to visiting or if you have access to classes, you always have access to reading, writing, and math. But the question is, how badly do you want to work to learn how to use these skills to advance your life? These are simply action steps. And the action steps that you're taking today are either going to put you in the pathway of new opportunities, or they will put you in the pathway that threaten your ability to become more successful upon release. You should focus on what weaknesses do you have and what strengths do you have, and what can you do to turn your weaknesses into strengths or accelerate your strengths or avoid spending time in areas that could expose you to weakness. This is really, when I was in prison, I used to write about, or I've written about in some of these other courses, of this concept called the Quadrant Theory. Right? And this isn't something I developed. It's something I stole by reading and learning from leaders. So they suggested that you can put your decision-making in one of 4 squares. That's what the quadrant does, right? One of 4 squares. The quadrant theory is something I learned from studying leaders. And I had to write it down just for a second to remind me of what it was about. And it really put your category of decision-making or action steps that you're going to take into 4 quadrants, right? One of the quadrants was high-risk, low-reward behavior. Do I want to take actions that have a high potential for risk, but a low potential for reward? Not if I'm preparing for success after release. What is an example of high-risk, low-reward behavior? Well, engaging in the trafficking of contraband, for example. There's a high risk. Somebody's going to tell on you. Something's going to happen. What's the reward? Oh my God, I got 2 Snickers bars and I sold them and somebody gave me back 3 Snickers bars. All of that's good and fine, but what did you win? A Snickers bar. Or I got to control the TV room. High risk. Everybody wants to challenge me. Do you control the channel? Do I control the channel? Do I sit in this specific area? High risk. Low reward. Nobody's going to care about that as you're preparing for success after prison. How about the other phase of the quadrant? High risk, high reward. Here's an example of that. Publishing. I published a lot of books while I was in prison. High risk, because they may accuse you of running a business, as I got accused of many times, but I was never scared about that. What I cared about is high reward, being successful when I got out of prison. So that was really important to me. And so publishing, I would put in the category of high risk, high reward. What is a low risk, low reward business? Well, that's just being lazy. How about sleeping all day? How about watching TV? How about spending all your time keeping up with the Kardashians or staying tuned to the latest reality show? Low risk, low reward. You just sit there waiting for calendar pages to turn. Here's a great area to focus your action skills. Low risk, high reward. What's something like that? Well, that's where I'm going to conclude this lesson. It's focusing on these skills that you can take action on developing right now, regardless of where you are. What are those skills? Well, I would define those skills as you can focus on reading and really developing your command of the English language. For me to be able to sit here in front of a camera and stay focused on looking at a tiny lens and looking at you while I simultaneously know I'm recording a camera over there that's recording me here, all of that requires enormous focus that I learned from reading while I was in prison. If you focus on developing your reading skills, you're simultaneously going to focus on developing your thinking skills, which we'll get to in a moment. Another skill that you develop is your verbal communication skills. Look for opportunities to develop how well you communicate. Because if you can communicate well, you can persuade other people to see your ideas and to engage in opportunities with you. Just like I did in persuading Bruce to partner with me or collaborate with me in this plan to help me get to the right prison where I wanted to go. Or how I persuaded, as I described in the previous video, people to invest in me and finance me on opportunities that could help me build financial success. If you can develop strong verbal communication skills and strong writing skills, you will really advance the prospects for your success in the days, weeks, months, years, and decades to come. Then we can look at the third component, which is really develop your math skills. It's one thing to get your GED. It's another thing to know how to master every math question in that GED book. For example, if I ask anybody on this participating course, what's 2 plus 2? Everybody's going to know the answer is 4. But if I'm going to ask you how to resolve a quadratic equation that's in the back of the GED book, that may stumble many people. So develop your math skills, develop your writing skills, develop your verbal skills. You will advance your prospects for success, but also develop your critical thinking skills. The more you understand that every decision comes with an opportunity cost, the more you are going to make decisions that align with how you're defining success. That's what preparing for success after prison is all about. It's about realizing you are the CEO of your own life. You are responsible for what you want to become. And as somebody who's been out of prison now for 9 years and yet continues to develop a high level of energy and passion towards reaching back into prisons and sharing strategies that worked for me with as many people as possible, this reflects my commitment to really working to improve outcomes of the system, of the criminal justice system. It's showing I really want to be the change that I want to see in the world. But it's not only for me, it's for you. This is not about me. These courses are about you. And I am just simply sharing with you the strategies that leaders and masterminds and mentors taught me. This made all the difference in the world for me. I hope that you will embrace these concepts and use them in your life so that you too can emerge successfully with your dignity intact, with opportunities to thrive and prosper, not as I define it, but as you define it. So define success, first step. Second step, set goals that align with how you define success. Third step, make sure that you aspire to something bigger than where you are right now. Fourth step, make sure that I left attitude out. Make sure that you have the right attitude, which is 100% commitment to sex, then aspire. And 5, take action. I am Michael Santos with PrisonProfessors.com, and I really want to thank you for being a member of our community. I believe in you, and I am going to take some action right now by ending this video so that I can prepare the next one. But make sure you pay attention to my man, Rodney White, a guy who served time in prison, but then because of the preparations he made, he's now a successful guy out here in the community. Be well.